Alright, a wonderful good day everybody and welcome back here to my channel God Shadow in 2020, still rocking Grixis Control, not exclusively but we'll talk about that in a second. So for the first video in 2020 I would just like to talk about the state of Modern, what we need to tackle, what I want to get banned, although most people know about those anyway, and then I'll make a series of both Grixis Control. Then I also promised to make a follow-up video on the Mono White Deathblade deck because people were experiencing a couple of problems against Ensnaring Bridge specifically, and then I think Blue White Control is actually better than people think right now, so I will also go about that. But let's start off with Grixis Control here. So Modern as it is seems to be rotten to the core, and there is not, I don't think there is a single ban that is going to fix that. If you're going after, though, let's talk about the meta first, because the meta has homogenized towards a triplet at the top, I would say. So on the one hand, there are all the Oko decks, right? There's Eldrazi Oko, there's Stoneblade Oko, there's Urza Oko, and you could argue that these decks are different, but they are all, part of the same, or a variety of the same archetype, because the play patterns are very similar to each other. It's basically about getting Oko down, and then the other pieces are just there, so in case your Oko doesn't hit or isn't good in that particular matchup, the other threats are meant to also torment your opponent. And I think that play pattern isn't healthy for Modern, but it's more than just Oko. We could deal with Oko, I would argue. Although it's of course a strong card, a turn 3 Planeswalker that doesn't do a whole lot on its own at first. Of course, it renders your opponent's creatures, elks and stuff, sure. But I think Modern could deal with that. The real problem is that these decks are getting ahead on mana with either Mana Dorks or Mox Opal, and they also splash random colors because both Mox Opal, Astrolabe, and these Mana Dorks make it so easy for them that even if your opponent does have Mancer, you're mostly on the same turn also countered through a counterspell, or even worse, a Veil of Summer, so you're also a card down and everything is hexproof and is uncounterable. And that also brings me to the core here. So I think the main offenders in Modern right now are Veil of Summer, because it just prevents interaction and it really, really punishes you for playing blue or black, which are basically also the only colors that can deal with Oko, and the core is just busted. Like, for 1 mana, this should not be a thing. It's a better counterspell, it's a better cryptic command most of the time. And it's just insane, because it protects so many things, right? It protects any permanent, so it's good against Fulminator Mage, it's good against just anything. And then there's Astrolabe. Astrolabe, as it stands, like, WotC fucked up so much in 2019 that Astrolabe is probably not a high priority on that list, but Snow, as they made it through Modern Horizons, like before Modern Horizons it wasn't a big deal because there were too few Snow permanents and good spells that we're seeing playing Modern, but now Snow is everywhere. Snow is just a superior basic land type because there's no drawback, there's just upside. Either it's confusing the spectrum goes from confusing your opponent by just playing a random snow land, or to diversifying your snow lands through names so you have more to trigger Field of the Dead, or just, playing Astrolabe and playing a 4 or 5 color deck with Blood Moon because you don't care. Why would you? You just need to hit one of your snow basics and Astrolabe and you're good to go. So that really pisses me off because on the one hand it plays around a couple of the necessary hosers that Modern had to check these kinds of decks that were aggressive on the mana base, and now that's just not a thing anymore. Nobody's playing Blood Moon because it's just so bad. And then, of course, there is the deck that's profiting from that in Eldrazi colorless, because nobody's playing real land hate, because against the most decks you're just running into some snow basic here that you can't even target with a Field of Ruin. And of course Eldrazi Tron, which surprisingly well mulligans for a turn 3 Tron as well, without having access to Ancient Stirrings or Sylvan Scrying, although I've seen green Eldrazi Tron lists now as well to play once upon a time, of course. Yeah, so people aren't punishing that anymore, and a normal mid-range deck or a normal control deck without land hate can't really deal consistently with these types of decks. And apparently my neighbor just started drilling something, but I hope that's not too annoying and he'll stop soon. So back on track here. So yeah, these two cards, if they are gone, I think Modern could regulate itself, and those are also not, you know, I mean, Veil of Summer is like a €5 or €6, so maybe a little bit more expensive in dollars, but I think it's also $5 or $6 card that people aren't gonna be angry about if it gets banned. In terms of capital, leave Okobi, it's fine for me, but we need to have answers be good. Of course, WotC also needs to print new kinds of removal spells for Planeswalkers. Both top to bottom, also bottom up. So I want creatures that make Planeswalkers specifically more expensive, so that you force, like these Oko decks, Oko Urza for instance, basically isn't running any removal spells. They have one or two explosives in the board, but the rest is just removal in the sideboard. In the main board, they don't need it. They are just overwhelming their opponents so much by pure value, and then just well, shrinking creatures down to being elks, that they don't need any form of real removal. And we just need to get back to a plain playing field there. So that's the Oko decks. Then there's Eldrazi, of course. Then there's the third, which for the most part is Death Shadow, because it's pretty good against the Oko decks and it's pretty fast as well. But Death Shadow I would actually not count as a significant margin of the metagame, because it falls in and out of favor so rapidly. It's not a really consistent deck, because it's very dependent on what it's playing against. Also, Eldrazi is pretty good against it. But yeah, and then trailing behind that is mostly some other snow interaction decks, snow midrange, Sultai, whatever. Then there is... Can people hear that? Then there is Titan decks, Amulet Titan, Titan Shift, that are all also playing Veil of Summer and partially playing Oko. And then there's Infect to run these over. But Infect having a surprisingly also difficult stand, but it has gotten so much better through Once Upon a Time and Oko. Well, that's it. And it's basically a 3 to 4 deck meta, and you will see that in most of the leagues as well. There's 3 or 4 Oko lists that you're running into, and then there's 1 or 2 others. It's really, like, I haven't seen Modern like this since Eldrazi Winter. It's play pattern wise, it's not fun to play, and what's most important to me, you know, people say that Oko requires a lot of skill to play. But Oko by itself is such a high quality card, and all the other cards that have been infused into Modern last year have been so high quality that there is no significant margin of skill required to play the format anymore. Like you just drop your turn 1 Dork, your turn 3 Oko, and maybe have a counterspell backup, and that's it. Like even an ape could be playing that deck and play pattern. You don't have to play around anything because you're just always doing the best thing on curve, maybe ahead of on curve than your opponent. And that brings me to Grixis right now, the state of Grixis. So we're being attacked on multiple fronts. 2019 hasn't been a good year for us. Because we have basically not gotten any significant upgrades. Drownloch is good, definitely good, but as people found out, like in the beginning when I was only playing 2, people told me you need to play 4, but it's a good card, definitely a good card. But mostly you are still running into decks like Eldrazi Tron, the Titan decks that are just not putting enough cards in their graveyards for you to be able to counter and remove stuff on curve. Also makes you more graveyard dependent, so you're more easily being hated by graveyard hate, which most of the time is being boarded against you anyway. And even with Thought Scour here in this slot, that's still not 100% reliable. So many a time you will just find yourself with a dead Drownloch in hand. And then there's Force of Negation, but Force of Negation also doesn't really play to our strengths. What we would really need, like the perfect card for me in Grixis would be Grixis colors, creatures, like blue, red, and black, a 3/2 or whatever, 3/1, with flash and enter the battlefield trigger, destroy target creature or planeswalker, something to that accord. That would be perfect. And I don't even think, like, of course it sounds strong, obviously. That's, why it's the perfect card, but it's also not too strong. Like, there's still combo decks, etc. that, it's just not doing anything against you getting a 3/1, which of course is also still good, but it's basically a munition expert, a little bit upgraded, but also more complex to cast. And I think that would be alright, both in terms of gameplay, and we need these kinds of answers. We need removals on creatures for planeswalkers. We need hate beers that are increasing the cost of planeswalkers. Specifically, yeah. So those are my 2 cents there. And now let's talk about Grixis as it is. So on the one hand, I cut down the mana base back to 22, which I haven't done in quite a while. But the reasoning here is that we can't compete. Like beforehand, we were always the biggest fish in terms of value. Almost nobody could compete with us in the late game. Not even Blue-White Control, because we're just cycling Nimbles through Kolaghan's commands with Snapcaster Mages, Jaces, and we just get there at some point. But now that's not the case anymore. All these Urza Oko decks are doing so much and playing so high quality to the board that once something resolves and we can't immediately get rid of it, what will happen at some point? That's a problem, because you can't just prevent everything at any point in time, because they're just cycling to their 8 to 10 high quality threats, and if you let one resolve, you're almost doomed. So I cut the utility land, be it Mystic Sanctuary, be it something else, and we're going down to 22 lands here. Then, so these cards here, this could always be a Thought Scour, just depending on whether or not you want to have that random part in your life or not. On drawing cards, but these are actually still pretty good. what we need to try to accomplish is getting ahead, or reducing our mana cost to getting ahead on curve and fighting those decks from the bottom up and not trying to outvalue them in the late game. So my answer here is, first of all, I want to have 3 Creeping Torpedoes because I need to race in the late game once I've cleared the battlefield before they draw more high quality threats that I can't deal with. Sometimes we also need to just bolt Creeping Torpedo and Oko or whatever. So Creeping Torpedo is essential. And then I think what we want to do here is trying to force Thing in the Ice into the format, because we need some kind of sweeper in the main board, especially against Urza and against other creature decks, like or creature dependent decks like Eldrazi and Death Shadow especially. And of course, Thing in the Ice can also deal with Planeswalkers, not Oko so much because it's just being elked, but with Planeswalkers pretty easily. And it increases our clock once we get there. So I think Thing in the Ice is going to be a good option. I haven't played it yet, but I'll make a deck, and in the next video you'll see Thing in the Ice if it works out. Then also a fringe card here that we haven't seen in a while, Liliana the Last Hope, and I have already played that. And Liliana is pretty good right now. So as I said before, people are trying to get ahead on curve through mana creatures. Although the premium or the number one option there is the Gilded Goose, many people are also playing Noble Hierarch in the banned Snowblade decks, for instance, or the Soul Herd decks that are splashing Oko, Simic Eldrazi. And against all these decks, Liliana Last Hope is pretty good. Also because Ren 6 has fallen a bit out of favor, people are resorting or coming back to 1 toughness creatures. So Liliana the Last Hope there does have utility already. And then, of course, all these decks are packing very, very little answers to stuff. They're just very threat dense. So if you can't keep Liliana around for a couple of turns and ultimate her, then of course your opponents can come back. And even if your opponent's playing like Veil of Summer, which is great as a defensive tool, of course sometimes you get them with just playing a Liliana that they didn't account for and run away with the game from there. Force of Negation, currently also a crucial part to just fight all the Okos, because you just need to stop that, and you need to have an additional card, although it costs you a card, but you need to have something to also counter the Veil of Summer that will always be there. They will never, if you have mana open, they will never play an Oko without a counterspell backup, because it's just so easy for them with a 1 mana counterspell. So that's for the main board. Dreadbore could be a thing here as well. We've played it for the longest time, but now I want to solve it differently. The Planeswalker issue, and therefore went back to Terminate, because Dreadbore was a real leverage against the Death Shadow decks and Eldrazi decks also to a great extent. Off to the sideboard. So Grim Lavamancer probably the best it has been in quite some time. Grim Lavamancer is something that you will always want to have against anything that's running a Gilded Goose, an Emery. It helps you to kill Urza, Oko, whatever. Grim Lavamancer has really overperformed, really great right now. Jigsaw Jailer, well, the meta isn't graveyard dominated, but whenever I take it out, I'm running into Crabvine. So I would say cut the Jailer if you don't expect a lot of graveyard decks, but then also don't be angry about it because you won't be beating them. Instead, of course, So there's another deck that I haven't been talking about. That's Mono Red Prowess, which is also very strong, very fast, very annoying. Another card that I don't think is healthy for Modern is Lava Dart, because that's also just obnoxious for most creatures. But that to a lesser extent, that's just annoying me to a big part. So you also might want to have Collective Brutality in here. Fry, not so much against the Okos, but of course sometimes you will also get an Oko with it, but especially the Urza decks. So killing Urza sometimes is really difficult, because you don't really want to have Terminate in, you don't really want to have Dreadbore because it's too slow, and you want to have something that's not counterable, right? In Blue-White Control, that role is being served by Dovin's Veto. In Grixis, I'm thinking about playing Fry, in the sideboard at least, to reliably get rid of Urza, which is just providing too much value, and of course, it also makes it a whole lot easier to deal with Oko, and it's uncounterable, so. And it also doesn't get hit by Veil of Summer, so your opponent can't do anything about it. So Fry should definitely be in there somewhere. So Collective Brutality I talked about already. Fulminator Mage. There's not a whole lot of green Tron right now. All of it is Eldrazi Tron. And against Eldrazi Tron, Fulminator Mage, bring it in on the play. Do not bring it in on the draw. Board it out on the draw. Try to get more value creatures onto the battlefield. Maybe a Plague Engineer. Maybe a Murderous Rider. You just need more answers. You need to be better at top decking. And the Fulminator Mages will just be too slow. But on the play, it's very, very good. What else is there? Noxious Grasp, I'm not a big fan of right now. Scorpion God against, well, it's not good against Oko itself, but against everything else that these decks are playing. Liliana of the Last Hope here and Scorpion God, both exceptionally good against anything that's running Ice Fang Coatl, a creature that has seen a significant rise lately in play. Archmage's Charm, currently also don't like it in Grixis, like it better in Blue-White Control. Norset is a prison piece that could also help you against all these Oko decks that are cantripping through Astrolabe, etc. But also a card that I don't really see in Grixis, but more in Blue-White Control. Yeah, and other than that, there is not a whole lot of great options, I think. I was also running, not Blood Moons, but I was running Magus of the Moon in the sideboard in between. Something that I could also see happening again. Because as I said, people are running too few Blood Moons, and I can't get rid of a Blood Moon anymore. After a short time, but even these Eldrazi decks are running so many basic lands right now that it's almost impossible to get them. Then there's Sorcerer's Spyglass and Phyrexian Revoker to also preemptively counter an Oko, for instance. Also something that most of them can't do anything about, which is very good, of course. So that is something, if you have really big problems with Oko, go with Phyrexian Revoker. You can get back with Kolaghan's Command, which is great. Yeah, and that's basically it. There's not a whole lot more that you could be running right now in Grixis colors. And the rest, there are a couple of flex slots, and you will always have a couple of open slots, and just fill those out with Mystical Dispute, Flusterstorm, something like that. Young Pyromancer, Actually, Young Pyromancer could also be something. Like if Thing in the Eyes doesn't work out, then we might have to go with Young Pyromancer to generate tokens and get through at some point. But as I said, I'll leave that to another video. Actually, Raktos Charm. Now that I see it, most of the time when I'm playing against Oko decks, they have like 6, 7, 8 food tokens. Surgical not so great right now, although if you're worried about Mystic Sanctuary being too good, that could also be an option. Yeah, but other than that, that's it. I'll cut the video short here, and then I will come around with a leak in the next video. So, see you then.